Good day, everyone. Welcome to another Vivid webinar. Today's topic is Enterprise DevOps, what ops teams need to consider for faster app releases. Next. I am your host today. My name is Rocky Pisto. I'm a chapter leader, longtime chapter leader involved in the BSM space, as well as help coordinate the BSM SIG. And we go on to the sponsored webinar today is by HP. Today's speakers is basically the product marketing team in the DevOps space, as well as some of the other product managers. So Ashish Kuthiala, who's Senior Director of Marketing and Strategy, DevOps. Eric Odell, Senior Product Marketing Manager. And Carrie Sprinkle, Senior Product Manager from HP Enterprise. So that's our team today for this session. Next. So today is a live recorded webinar so that you'll be able to hear this thing at a future date if you actually missed the call today. So this is a live session. And there's also an area in the panel to ask questions. So we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So type in your questions in the question panel. Next. And here's an image of that webinar control panel, and you'll see an area for questions. And again, just type in where it says type your question here. We will try to get to them at the end of today's presentation. And again, the questions are recorded. If we don't get to all of them, the team will answer the questions that are in the panel, and we will send that out at a future date with the live recording, which will include questions and the answers to those questions. So look forward to that. And with that, I think I hand it off to Ashish. It's all yours.
Yep. Thank you, Rocky. I want to start off with a very obvious statement I think all of us are acutely aware of today, which is, increasingly software is helping a lot of us, compete in the marketplace and create differentiation between us and our competitors. The examples of many companies such as Uber are well known, where just using software they were able to displace very traditional entrenched industries, and now are, market leaders and have market value caps well over $50 billion, for example, for Uber. So, increasingly we do realize, and we are starting to figure out how to use software to create differentiation with our competitors in the marketplace. Even though everybody kind of knows this and knows that it is essential to create software that is differentiated, that is high quality, and we need to get it out there very frequently, and we need to get it out there with high quality, we all struggle, right? We all struggle to get it out in the marketplace as fast as we would like to. Next slide, please. And if you look at the very typical software delivery lifecycle, from where the business demands that we deliver something as an IT organization, all the way to the users to experience, the new business value that we are delivering, and we go through the standard life cycle for developing and releasing software, we often find that there are many, many hurdles to kind of going faster. Next click, please. And as a lot of you might actually identify with this, software development is no different than maybe any other manufacturing process, such as manufacturing and releasing a car to our end user. And there's one team working on it, kind of doing the things they have to do, handing it to the next team and next team, so on, till the actually finished product gets out to the end user. But along the line, we see that it is actually full of challenges. It's full of work that kind of keeps us, holds us back. A lot of work builds up. A lot of teams are locally optimized, and it's a really one-way flow from left to right. What is very interesting is, though, manufacturing companies such as Toyota have applied lean manufacturing techniques to their manufacturing facilities and their processes. The high-tech industry is just starting to look at this and say, how do I make this go faster? How do I make this go more frequently? Next slide, please. And And if you look at it a little bit more closely, here's an example from a customer of ours where the actual touch time or the actual work done on each one of these activities only adds up from, from code generation to deploying to about 4 hours and 43 minutes. But the actual time taken to take it from the left side to the right side is 6 weeks. It's because of all the challenges that we saw just, prior to this slide, where there are so many different bottlenecks to kind of moving faster, whether you're waiting for infrastructure to be set up, whether you're waiting for deployment to be done, application deployment to be done, and you have to do it several times because it fails a lot of times. Whether you can't get past testing or you can't get past the user feedback because there are just so many challenges in doing this. If you go to the next slide, please. So how does DevOps help, right? So if you really look at it, DevOps helps. It's a set of practices, it's culture, it's a retooling of your processes to really help you build a line of code and immediately take it through the entire software delivery lifecycle and have it production ready at any given point of time, instead of breaking up the chunk into massive pieces where you wait 3 months at each stage or 3 weeks. The idea is that you always have a production-ready branch that is always deployable. Now, whether you deploy it or not is up to the business. So in that sense, you need to be able to write a piece of code, whether that's 5 lines or 50 lines that day or 2 lines, but be able to continuously integrate and build it, test it, release it, and deploy it in different environments, and be able to continuously monitor and operate this. But most importantly, throughout this life cycle, you need to be assessing what your code looks like and not waiting till the very end to kind of figure out, how do your users react, whether they open up service tickets, whether they are, mad and they complain to your CEO or your, VP of engineering that, I am having just a very bad user experience with your application. So how do you, continuously assess your application? How do you continuously make it much better user experience for your users? How do you actually remove some of the bottlenecks so that when you do see a problem or you do see the opportunity to introduce an innovation, you can do it really fast, really quickly? So in today's webinar, it's aptly named, what do you need to consider on the ops side of the house for faster and better quality app releases? We are going to focus on 2 areas. We are going to focus on the continuous delivery and deployment space, and we are going to focus on the continuous assessment space, very specifically on user experience and how we can actually make that better for our users and deliver the right thing at the right time to the right customer. Next slide, please. So I would like to hand over the next section of the webinar to Carrie Sprinkle, who's going to talk about how do we accelerate our application releases and deploy applications with a much faster pace, with much more accuracy and a lot less rework, as one of the areas where you can remove the bottlenecks to that high velocity innovation we just talked about. Carrie?
Thank you, Ashish. So if we think about where does, this webinar is specifically about the operations side of the house, right? Ops in the ops piece of DevOps. And I can't seem to move the slide. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So if we look at what is actually slowing the release process, we saw that this is a bit repetitive from Ashish's earlier slide, but we're focusing here on specifically, oh shoot, evidently I have automated timing. Okay, we are focusing specifically on, the issues that affect the operations side. And so we've got, all these different teams. We've got a database team and an applications team and an operations team, and we've got, people managing the OS and the hardware and all of these different things. All of the different environments that are required as an application moves through the life cycle, right? So if we look at, a dev and a test and a QA, then add on top of that the very different types of environment, right? Maybe some of it's on the cloud, some of it's on physical, some of it's virtual. It gets very complicated very quickly. And in addition, you start adding in all the different tools that are required specifically to deploy, right? So if we look at what is operations role? Operations role is to deploy the application not only in production, but also to provide some environments for dev and test. So they've got to deploy it in all these different environments, and then finally, they've got to get it deployed in production, and then they've got to manage and monitor it going forward. So if we look at all of the different components that make that up, it becomes very complex very quickly. So what do we need to make this better, right? If you could actually just declare what the application needs to look like, right? I'm not going to worry about all the dependencies. I'm not going to worry about whether it's on a cloud or on physical hardware. I just need, this is what my application needs to look like regardless of the infrastructure that it's sitting on. I want to be able to set it up so that it can be automatically deployed the same way every time to the right environment, whether it's dev or test or production, at the right time, and based on these specific application requirements, right? What are the application requirements? Is there a specific type of database? Is there an application? What does the architecture look like, right? All of the specific requirements for that application. And I need to be able to do that, not just in production, but I need to be able to do that across all the lifecycle stages. Because if you think back to Ashish's slide on where all those bottlenecks were, deploying and provisioning was a big bottleneck across the lifecycle. So I need to be able to deploy quickly exactly what's needed at the right time in the right environment. Oops. So HPE has developed a product called Codar, and Codar is designed specifically to do exactly that, right? So first of all, you design the application topology, and we use this concept of topology models as opposed to a deployment script. And the idea of, we have a very unique way of doing this topology model in that we call out, or we have in the model we call out specifically the application requirements, right? So I don't specify which environment that an application is going to be deployed. I specify what is required from an environment for that application. So I've got a very simple example there, right? So we've got a database that's required, and an application sits on top of that, and there's basically a database server and an application server. Very simple application here. So the database server is not specified, the application server is not specified. What's specified in there are the requirements for that particular type of server. So it could be specified that it needs an Oracle database, or it could be specified that it needs Postgres, or it could just be specified that it needs a database server that meets certain requirements, right? We don't care what kind of database. Again, it depends on how the application is architected on how specific you have to get in the requirements. The goal is to keep it as generic as possible so that when it's time to deploy, we actually marry that with the available infrastructure. So we look at what is the available infrastructure in the environment where we're deploying the application. So in dev, I've got multiple environments. Great. Which one meets my criteria? Great, that's where I'm going to deploy it. And again, we kind of separate the infrastructure from the application just to simplify that. And what that means is that I can deploy that application anywhere at any time on any infrastructure and automate that complete process. So I spend a lot less time trying to troubleshoot as I move from one environment to another, or one type of, from cloud to physical, all of these different types of things that cause problems. We eliminate all of that. And as part of that, of course, we need to manage that application as it goes through the pipeline, not so much from a release management standpoint, but just being able to move and deploy that application from one environment to the next. Now, we can take on some of the release management capabilities, so we can actually automate this process, and this is where the continuous delivery piece comes in. right? So application gets deployed in development environment. It meets all of the checkpoints, all of the any tests that are run, and we have stage gate operations at each lifecycle stage, so that assuming it meets all of the requirements in dev, it will automatically be promoted to QA and deployed there. Specific actions will be taken, tests will be run. Again, assuming it passes all those tests, everything is good to go, it will be automatically promoted to the next stage, to the staging environment. And again, assuming it's all good, we can automatically promote to production. Although some people like to put at least one stopping point somewhere where somebody has to push a button. Quite often it's between staging and production, right? So continuous delivery typically means we've brought it all the way up to where it's ready to go to production. Somebody click the button and let's do it. And then, of course, continuous deployment, we can automate that last step. Continuous deployment means there is no interference, right? It's going all the way through, and assuming it passes all the tests, it's going to production. So it means every valid build will eventually make it to production. So that's how Codar addresses continuous delivery and some of the issues. Again, it's really all about defining that topology correctly so that we can deploy that application in any infrastructure, in any environment across the lifecycle, and then controlling those stage gates to automate the process across all the life cycles, right, and get it out to production quickly. There are a few advantages. I talked quite a bit about the model, right? So it is visual, it is drag and drop, you know, very easy to use. We do embrace external content, so you can actually import your application components from various pieces and parts. Gosh, the automation kicked in again. So, so if you've already got chef recipes and Puppet manifests out there, we can use those. We've got a lot of out-of-the-box integration, completely open APIs, so we can tie into all of the different infrastructures. And then finally, we use operations orchestration underneath, and that is the very powerful orchestration engine that we use really across all of HPE, and gives us all the flexibility. So just one quick success story before I pass this off to Eric for the user experience. But we did have, in EMEA, we had a large international retail customer based in EMEA, but locations worldwide, and they really had way too many manual steps in the deployment process. They were lacking quality across that process. Every deployment, they were very specific about that. Every single deployment came out differently, and it took way too long. So they very much look like that complex scenario that Ashish showed earlier, and deployment was one of their big struggling points. Just trying, again, from environment to environment, but even within the environment, because the process was very manual, right? So one person interprets a step maybe a little differently. Obviously, there could be typos, right? So all kinds of issues with the manual situation. So in 2014, they had 150 applications that they were deploying on a regular basis. Not a single one went right the first time out. And in most cases, the second and third time out. So typically, it was a 3-month manual process just to get prepared and ready for release. Now that's release to production, right? And it took about 5 hours to deploy that application after their 3 months of prep, right? So when they had that 3 months, they were convinced that they'd done enough tests and they, you know, had it go wrong enough times. They knew they were confident they were going to get it right. Then it took 5 hours to actually do the deployment. So now, after implementing Codar, it takes about 20 minutes of prep. It takes 2.5 minutes to deploy most of their application. And now they started with 2, and they're implementing this. Obviously, it was quite successful, so they're now implementing across additional additional applications, but they started with 2 of their most critical applications, and one of them is extremely complex, one of their payment systems. So the improvements were just overwhelming, and they haven't had any production incidents related to rollout since they began. So very successful situation there. So really this brings a couple of advantages, not just, obviously if I can be more efficient in getting the application deployed and I can lower the error rates of deployments and that type of thing, that's obvious, very obvious benefits, but and certainly that can help you accelerate your time to market, right? If it instead of 3 months, if it takes me 2 hours to prepare, then I can get things out quickly and I can really start getting things to market much faster and addressing, get things to market before my competition. The kind of a side benefit is the ability to improve the application quality, and we found this true with a lot of our customers, because if you can deploy successfully every time in your testing environment, and I can deploy it within minutes, then I can add more tests and I can do more, right? It doesn't take me a week or 2 weeks or 6 weeks to stand up that testing environment. So I can continuously, I can do some tests, tear it down, run some different tests, tear it down, run more tests, right? So I can do a lot more with testing, and it really provides a huge benefit on the testing side. Instead of the minimal test I can get away with, now I can do all those extra things that I always wanted to test for but didn't have time to do. So that's, we've really seen application quality go up as a result of this. And again, just not something that we were looking to do, but we've had a lot of customer feedback that tends to be kind of a side benefit. And then the quick time to value, this goes back to being able to embrace the existing content. So when you bring this in, it's not like you have to start automation from scratch. Whatever automation tools you have in place, obviously we're going to embrace any other HPE tools that you have, right? Like the server automation or any of the other automation tools that we have, but we also embrace those third-party and open source tools like Puppet and Chef, so that you don't have to redo all that. You don't have to recreate that. So as part of that deployment plan, you actually include your existing automation so that, again, you can get it up and running very quickly and start seeing the value right away. So that is continuous delivery with Codar, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to Eric to talk about the user experience.
And good morning, everyone. I hope that you can see my screen. We're going to talk about DevOps and the app performance monitoring and how bad user experience is bad for business. And during this section, I'm going to talk about a little bit of the research that I've conducted over the last year surrounding the user experience, how it's going to affect your application, how it's going to affect your business, and, of course, the bottom line. We'll talk not only about the research, but hopefully to define a little bit about what the user experience is, and then also to talk about different forms of user experience feedback, and we'll get into a little bit of App Pulse in terms of how that is going to assist you in all of your continuous assessment efforts. So why don't we get going on this? Let's face it, instant gratification, it's the new normal. People expect to get whatever they want immediately, regardless of their choice of technology, location, or context, and regardless of whether using a web app, a mobile app, a desktop, or a mission-critical application at work. And if they don't get what they expect, there's going to be hell to pay for it. The recent App Usage and Abandonment Survey study shows that a subpar user experience affects not only the success of the app itself, but also the brand and the business. So when a mobile app is running slowly, almost half will uninstall the app, and 32% are going to look for an alternative elsewhere. And if the application is problematic, 80%, they're going to abandon it after 30 they're going to abandon it after 3 attempts or fewer. And more than 2/3 say that app issues give them a lower opinion of the company that created the app. So DevOps teams understand the importance of prioritizing user experience, but all too often they don't have the tools that they need to deliver a superior UX. Here's the point many companies are missing. Focusing on the user experience, including measuring and monitoring UX KPIs, not only improves the app, it also increases your success with DevOps. So the objective of DevOps is to leverage automation and feedback to remove bottlenecks and eliminate waste. And the right APM tools can provide that critical feedback, making continuous assessment and rapid iteration of both the app and the UX possible. And this all makes for better business results. According to Gartner, you're not doing DevOps if you're not focused on the customer experience. In a recent research called the DevOps APM and User Experience Survey, Dimensional Research and HPE surveyed about 313 DevOps managers. The findings showed that 85% of developers say they're focused on the customer experience. However, 53% said they do not have full access to APM tools. So when you think of the rising expectations users have for a delightful user experience, it is a two-sided coin. It creates an opportunity to distinguish your brand, boost your reputation for service, increase customer loyalty, and expand your customer base. But if you can't continuously satisfy the user expectations, you're risking severe consequences. And here's a quick synopsis of the possible outcomes. Well, first, there's the good. If users see improvements, they love you for it. When companies practically fix a problem with an app, whether it's a web app, a mobile app, or desktop application, loyalty and ratings will rise. And just one example, when Facebook fixed an app that they had been draining, that had been draining smartphone batteries, it generated positive press that was shared across thousands of sites, resulting in both a surge in usage and higher rating for the app. Now here's the bad. If the users are less than wowed, they take action. When your app isn't a joy to use, or when your business ignores the complaints about an application's performance, the users they're going to take matters into their own hands. And literally, they first check for an update, and if none exists, they stop using the application. And then they seek an alternative. And when they find one, they delete the application. And many of them, some of them, will write a scathing review. And here's the ugly. If you fake it, you pay the price. Most businesses are well aware of the consequences of a bad review, but in some cases, they choose deceit over resolution. Bell Canada, for example, was fined $1.25 million for planting phony app reviews, and they basically paid their employees to go and incentivize their employees to go to the app stores and plant fake reviews. So let's talk about what exactly the user experience is. There's many ways that you could look at it. First off, is it utility? Is this app useful to achieve my objectives? Or is it usability? Does the app help me to get things done easily and efficiently? The other way to look at it is that it's all about aesthetics. Is it visually appealing, enjoyable? Is it entertaining? Another thing is empowerment. Does the app make me feel in control? Or identification. Can I see myself in the app, and do I feel better when using it? There are other items like stimulation. Does the app give me inspiration? Does it arouse that wow feeling? Is it important to me to the point where I can't do without it? And does the app stimulate me to play? The key point is that DevOps teams need to focus on everything that matters to the user in order to deliver a satisfactory user experience. And that requires taking a more detailed view of who the user is. In Gartner's report, Delivering User Experience with Agile Development Teams, analyst Magnus Revang identifies the user experience as that perceived quality when the user is doing a work task. But doesn't this definition of the user experience go beyond just the function, the aesthetics, and the stimulation of the mobile application? After all, today's mobile user is the most impatient and intolerant user of all time. They will delete you if it's not working right. And these users expect to have what they want when they want it. And when do they want it? They always want it now. Key point here is that DevOps teams need to focus on everything that matters to the user in order to deliver a satisfactory user experience. And that requires taking a more detailed view of who the user is. So there are multiplying sources of user experience feedback. As the importance of the user experience increases, so does the sources of the feedback, including APM tools, application performance monitoring tools. A myriad of these tools now detect and diagnose UX-related issues in all of the categories we've already discussed. There's the user voice. It's not just about numbers and metrics. DevOps teams also must collect qualitative user assessments of the experience, including direct feedback entered by users engaged on the app interface. And of course, there's also the app stores. And DevOps teams must now mine the feedback and comments that users post in app stores on websites, social media, and many other locations. Now, one of the places to start in improving the user experience is understanding just who your users are and how they're using your application, because the attributes that really matter the most will vary considerably according to the persona of the user of the application. And it's not just about demographics, age, gender, race, geographical location. It's all about the user's journey or the context of how they're using the application. So one of the things that you need to be doing is creating a journey map or a user flow. And this is a starting point for getting to know your users, to directly observe their interactions with your application. And Gartner refers to this as creating a journey map which describes the current state of the steps that a specific user archetype or persona goes through to achieve a goal relevant to the organization. Another term for this is the user flow, or following the funnel of the user interactions with your app screen by screen. And I'm going to get into some technology it's a solution that HPE has delivered recently about user flows that can show you how to track this. But if you can collect metrics about typical user actions, you can then drill down and see which ones were slow, which cause errors or crashes, which cause users to abandon the app, and so on. Now the goal is to pinpoint the gaps between the user's expectations and their actual experience as they use the app so that delivery teams can identify and resolve issues that impact the user experience. So there are many challenges of meeting the customer expectations for user experience. It's one thing to identify the attributes of a great user experience and understand the nuances of user personas and their interactions with your app. It's quite another thing to make the UX the focal point of DevOps. The key issue is fragmentation. The sheer number of variables for UX design is it's a big bang style explosion with hundreds of device types, a myriad of operating systems, and multiple connection options, user flow scenarios, RAM considerations, orientation options, etc., all increasing and spiraling outward. At the same time, pinpointing which metrics of the digital user experience to measure and monitor can also be very complicated. How do you measure performance? Should you measure the network response time or the UI response time? And for which platforms and operating systems? Under what conditions? How do you measure stability and reliability? Should you measure resource usage, such as battery drain? So many different permutations. The new challenges of UX design are very similar to the new challenges of app development. Both should be driven by customer insight and not guesswork. Both should be the subject of continuous assessment, feedback, and of rapid iteration. And both require increasing collaboration among teams, and both focus on accelerating release cycles. And that means both require a life cycle approach. So the DevOps movement is the response to these requirements from the app development side. DevOps has been gaining momentum in the past few years, not only because it's a way to shorten release cycles and get better visibility into the internal environment, but also because it improves quality. It does so by continuously harnessing digital user experience feedback at every step of the life cycle. So there's continuous integration and testing in the build phase, continuous delivery and deployment in the release phase, and continuous assessment and monitoring of the user experience. So to deliver a consistently great user experience, UX design and development should follow the same approach. Continuous integration and testing, continuous delivery, and continuous operations such as monitoring, all incorporating high velocity, frequent feedback loops into each iteration. So there's no question that the UX will determine the success or the failure of your app. So the new question is, why do so few DevOps teams measure and monitor the quality of the UX over its entire life cycle? All too often, existing user experience tools and processes cover only a small portion of the UX life cycle. And some account for only a few variables that determine UX quality, and others monitor variables that provide incomplete or misleading information. And still others don't monitor the UX much at all. So the lack of end-to-end digital UX monitoring tools and practices can lead to a phenomenon that Gartner is referring to as locking in ignorance. And this means that the UX design is completed before development in a big bang design upfront approach, which makes it extremely difficult to change the UX to reflect actual feedback. The net result, in many cases, the user experience actually degrades with each software enhancement. And that's why we see such statistics as what we see in some of the surveys I've conducted over the last year. 75% of applications suffer from degraded apps, slow networks, slow load times. More than 2/3 of the time, teams learn about performance issues from end users. And again, 61% of the time, they lack end-to-end visibility from the back end, the net request, and to the user action. And this all came from a survey that I conducted this last fall, and this is coming from the DevOps APM and User Experience Survey. We see that really what DevOps need is visibility to a mobile app user experience and tools for improving it. They really are lacking an APM that features user experience dashboards. They don't have end-to-end visibility from the back end to the network request all the way, to the user action, and they have no insight into the line of code that is causing the slow performance or the crash. So let's take a look at some processes that you should put in place for merging the UX into the DevOps lifecycle. What does that entail? First, you need to understand your users, and this involves formalizing a process for creating the journey maps or user flows described earlier. And you need hard data about the different personas who will be using your app and a complete picture of how they'll be using the app. Okay, and this data should be constantly validated as usage patterns change very often. Using these journey maps, you can create scripts for synthetic monitoring that simulate user behavior so that when an issue or degradation is found, development teams can quickly resolve the issues before end users even discover it. The second one is measuring what matters. When you truly understand your users and what's important to them, you'll know exactly which variables of the application UX to measure. And you must measure what matters from the user's perspective, things like performance, stability, errors, battery usage, network consumption, and many more. Third thing is monitoring the user experience. What's needed is a lifecycle approach to monitoring UX, including a process for resolving issues that are identified. And that means monitoring should be continuous and proactive for all key user interactions, devices, and it should trigger alerts to DevOps teams when problems occur. Ultimately, DevOps should implement a single measurement that encapsulates the overall user experience so that it can be tracked over time and that issues can be addressed continuously. Finally, we take a look at the fourth thing is watch transactions end-to-end. DevOps teams should be able to trace transactions end-to-end, and this requires instrumenting apps and app servers so that DevOps can collect the data needed to establish benchmarks and observe and address these trends over time. And so I want to introduce to you a smarter solution for end-to-end monitoring that can assist you in continuous assessment of your applications called Hewlett-Packard Enterprise App Pulse Suite. So here's the core elements of App Pulse Suite. First, we have HPE App Pulse Active, and this is a proactive, continuous, real-time synthetic monitoring for all of your applications. That's web, mobile, cloud, and desktop. Next module is HPE App Pulse Mobile. And this is the first complete solution for measuring the user experience of mobile apps and analyzing the business impact of user engagement. And finally, we have Hewlett-Packard Enterprise App Pulse Trace. This traces end-to-end transaction flow through all service tiers to isolate the problems to the line of code, exception, or the specific log message. These are three integrated solutions that deliver one fantastic user experience. So here's a glimpse of of AppPulse Active that provides the proactive synthetic monitoring that I was talking about. This just gives you one view for all critical data and alerts. It emulates the application application end users, and it detects performance and stability issues for the web, mobile, and cloud-based apps. It gives you that, the overview feature that you're seeing right here gives you that single pane of glass and lets you see all the performance data and alerts in a single view, and then drill down to areas of interest to investigate things further. So this is a view of HP AppPulse Mobile, and I talked to you earlier in this deck about the user flows. And what this is here is the HPE AppPulse Mobile user flow, and it allows you generally to follow the customer journey screen by screen. It presents a data-driven graphical view of user engagement that follows the funnel of user interactions with your mobile app screen by screen. And for each screen, it shows you key metrics such as the total number of sessions and the most popular user actions. And you can then drill down into metrics such as the user actions that were slow or actions that resulted in errors or crashes. And you can also see the number of users who exited your app, so you can quickly determine how to optimize the user experience and keep your users fully engaged. And it gives you the option of seeing data over various time periods for a particular version number or for all the versions. Also, with AppPulse Mobile, we have the crash session trail. Pretty much there's no more guessing games. The crash session trail automatically captures all the user actions prior to the crash, and you can follow them from the point of the launch, know where they went screen by screen, where they tapped, where they swiped, everything that they did leading up to the crash. And with the breadcrumbs, it enhances your ability for developers to isolate the root cause of crash by letting them seed breadcrumbs at critical junctures in the user experience. And these breadcrumbs, they can provide vital information such as whether or not the login was successful, whether an HP request succeeded or not. And in this scenario, you see here that the breadcrumb shows that the camera cache memory was low. And so when the user tapped on the scan button, there's where your crash occurred. So combine the crash trail, the breadcrumbs, and the device state information. You have a wealth of information that can help you isolate the suspects that caused the crash. Finally, in this arsenal of the AppPulse suite, we have HP AppPulse Trace. And what you're seeing here is Trace 360. It gives you this visibility you need to find and fix the app performance and stability problems right away. Trace allows you to isolate problems that are negatively impacting the user experience, drilling down to the root cause, and you go from the user action down to the line of code, down to the specific transaction log, message, or exception. Trace 360, it gives you that full picture needed for issue isolation. You can trace all the aspects of transaction execution, including end-to-end flow, code timing, contextual log, exceptions, database queries. And with a 360-degree view of transaction, application teams get a holistic and intuitive transaction monitoring view for analyzing distributed transactions across different dimensions. And here's where it comes all together. HP AppPulse Mobile is one of 3 modules for the HP AppPulse suite, and with this end-to-end monitoring solution, application teams can quickly isolate problems that negatively impact the user experience and drill down to the root cause. And this example of the synergy here, when HP AppPulse Mobile detects a failed HP request with a mobile app, AppPulse Trace can isolate the problem cause through all of the service tiers right down to the line of code. Okay, so app teams fix the problem, and then they can continuously monitor for continuous improvement. Again, there's no more guessing games, and you can correlate the issues from the user experience directly to the application execution in runtime. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Ashish, and Ashish, I want to talk about how everything that we've learned today in this webinar, how it helps us with continuous innovation practices. And we want to talk a little bit about A/B testing, canary rollouts, as well as feature toggling. Can you take us home on this, Ashish?
Absolutely. So, we talked at the very beginning of the webinar how it has become important to be the first one, be really quick and be very frequent with your innovations reaching the marketplace, because that's what the competition is doing, and they are actually using software as a differentiator, if you remember from the first slide, to be able to differentiate themselves in the services and the in the services they offer to their users. So if you are able to incorporate some of the practices and some of the tools and some of the process changes that we just talked about in the last 40 minutes, you can do some really interesting innovation practices and innovation rollouts to the marketplace. Given with the fact that you can start to see what the market really needs with some real-time market insight that Eric talked about, you can do very interesting things. You can do A/B testing, which is very simple when you are not so sure about whether one version of the software is going to work better than the other one. Companies will tend to roll out 2 simultaneous versions to a limited set of people and kind of see which one really gains more traction. And based on what better response do you get, and it could be as simple as, is purple a better color to roll out on the website, or is yellow a better color? And as you roll this out and you see what is better adopted, you can then pull back the other one and then roll out the color that really resonates with the market. This could be a feature, this could be a color, this could be a schema, this could be anything that you want to test with the market. And you can do it simultaneously, and you can test the results between 2, 3, 4, 5 groups, right? That's A/B testing. Canary rollouts are, from the days when it used to be coal mines and we did not have scientific equipment to determine whether it was safe to go down in the coal mine for the day and start working. Coal miners would actually take down this yellow bird called a canary and place it at the mouth of the cave or the tunnel. And if all was well and the bird was alive, they would go in for the day and they would actually go do the work. But if the bird died, they would run the other way. And so it's really a way of sniff testing and figuring out whether it's safe to go in there, whether this thing is going to work or not. And in software with DevOps, the idea is the same. Roll out a feature, roll out a certain business service, and see the response to that. And companies like Facebook and Google and LinkedIn do this all the time with us without us realizing it. The features that I see are not necessarily seen by my wife or my coworker or my friends. The features that they're seeing, I don't see them. They're always testing the market, looking at capturing what the market responds to that. And then you can do this by geography, by demographics, by age group, any which way, and test your market and see what features work for which customer segment of yours. And feature toggling is actually pretty simple. It's nothing more than at the very beginning we talked about always having your code-based production ready and available all the way to the production side of the house. But it's a business decision at that point whether you turn it on or you turn it off for the end users to see. So just with the click of a button, you could turn on a feature, turn it off, and react to the market, be proactive in the market, react to your competitors, etc. So if you have practices such as DevOps and some of the other features and tools and processes we talked about, based on real-time market insight, you can do much more smarter releases based on what your business wants to do. And of course, the idea there is to improve the user experience you're providing to your customers. Can we go to the next slide, please? If what you found today was useful and you would like to join a monthly online meetup that we do, we actually bring in customers, and you don't have to be a customer, but you could join this. And it is a roundtable meeting that we have once a month. We have more than 50 companies actually sending their team members here to learn and share with their peers. It's a customer-to-customer peer interaction with usually myself and maybe another person joining in to facilitate that meeting. Very rarely we will actually present something that is on request. We bring in thought leaders such as Gene Kim, Gary Groover, Kurt Wittner from Forrester to kind of help add to the mix. Typically, it's how you are struggling or how you are doing DevOps, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and you have a chance to ask your peer customers on how they're dealing with this. If you are interested in joining this monthly group, please send an email to drdevops@hpe.com. Next slide, please. And Rocky, I will turn it over to you to talk about what's next, what's coming in Discover, With that, I would
Great,
also like to
Ashish.
remind the audience, if you have any questions, please enter them in the panel. We have a few that, we will answer, but, please keep them coming.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this is the more interactive, the better. And again, the benefit here for the Vivint community is to ask questions, share information, and hopefully we learn from each other. So again, I encourage you to send in questions. If we don't get to them today, we'll get them answered in the near future and get it back to you. But again, feel free. So I hope everyone has the opportunity to attend this year's Discover Conference in Las Vegas. It's a great venue to come together, excuse me, to come together and to learn from each other, to network, to get all the latest and greatest in areas that should help grow your career. And at the bottom of that slide, you'll see that there is a link to the Discover Conference if you have not registered. And as a Vivint member, you will get a $300 discount. So take advantage of that. And, maybe not for this year, but in the future, if HP is always looking for use case scenarios, customer scenarios that they can present at the conference. And typically what happens if your presentation of an upgrade or some new solution that you've implemented from HP software gets accepted, you get a conference registration for free. So think about that in the future. It's a great way, again, to network and to grow your career. Next slide. And, there's a whole track in the DevOps area, and it's relevant to both if you're on the ops side or the app side. So, again, you can take a look at the scheduler and all the registration information of all the events that are happening at Discover around DevOps. So if this doesn't help your company, there's something wrong. If these sessions are relevant to what you're doing with technology, you need to be involved. Next slide. So, Vivint takes a deeper look in this area. And for the past 6, 7, 8 years, we've been focusing on something called a deep dive session. So it's beyond the typical session during the conference. This is a 4-hour drill down into the product, the integrations, the customizations, the automations, how to actually make these products work in a real end user environment. And we have, in the ops area, we have, at least 4 sessions here in different categories. But if you click on the link into the system, there's actually 15 different sessions, and they're filling fast. I think some are starting to be sold out 2 weeks before the conference. So take advantage of this. This happens the day before the conference. So if you're flying in the morning to the conference, you got all afternoon. It's a great way to kick off your Discover experience. So take advantage of that. Next. So at this point, we've got some questions we want to address, and I think we've got a couple here for now that possibly we can talk about. Let me just pull it up. I'm looking at ones that we can take a look at. Here's one I think Ashish is, what are the tests or verifications done in stage to mark for production moves? Is that something we can address in a quick answer?
I think this is a very broad, generic question. I'd love to understand the intent behind the question, but really the test or verifications today, really depend on what you're trying to deliver, what is the code change that you have made, whether this is in the app itself, whether this is, in the back-end production systems. There's, what we are trying to do with DevOps is get immediate feedback for the localized change that you're making in your code base. So what I mean by that is, if you do want the code to move very fast from, your design concept to your developer kind of making the change, checking it in. You don't want those tests to be running 3 to 6 months later, because the context of that is lost on the developer. When it comes back with a bug, then the developer has to switch context. You can go, what was I really doing 6 months ago on this code base? Why did I make this line of change? It takes a lot of effort, and by that time, the impact of that is lost. So as soon as somebody checks in code, you want to execute your tests. You want to pick the right set of tests, and we're doing a lot of work in HP, R&D here, where we run big data analysis to see, do I really need to run the 20,000 test suite for the 6 lines of code of change that I've just done? Or can I run, these 30 tests with 95%, 98% confidence and run those particular tests? So, there's a lot of analytics going into that. There's a lot of selection of the right test for the right code change so that we can confidently release this to the next stage of the life cycle.
So I've got one. If I'm an OMI or OpsBridge customer using that technology as a single pane of glass, does the App Pulse suite integrate into that as just another vehicle that I can use to capture both real time and
So Rocky, the answer to your question is yes. So App Pulse suite does integrate directly with OMI OpsBridge. And you can pull all the performance and stability metrics into OMI. You can see, the synthetic metrics as well as what's happening with real users. From there, you're able to drill down into App Pulse Active for more information, or into App Pulse Mobile for more information. And the beauty of the integration with App Pulse Suite is you can then continue from there and drill down to the line of code, exception, or log message down into that using App Pulse Trace.
And is it just for mobile devices, or can I use it?
No, it's not. With App Pulse Active, it's emulating users and devices, and this is for web, mobile, SaaS, desktop applications. I mean, for gosh sakes, we have a customer that I talked to just the other day who's using App Pulse Active to take a look at the performance and the availability of Skype for Business. So there are a lot of different uses that you can take on with this.
And how is the product sold? Is it by node or?
Okay, so App Pulse Suite, you can go to our pricing page. There's multiple different pricing solutions there, directions that you can go.
Okay.
But I'll give you an example with App Pulse Mobile. It's priced per monthly active user, but there's different types of pricing for active, for mobile, and for trace. But if they buy that as with active, they can with the suite they can get one price for the whole thing.
Okay. Great. I think we're there. It's the top of the hour. We're a few minutes over, but I think we've addressed some of the questions that have come through. So unless there's anything else, I think we're done here for today. I want to thank our sponsor and the presentation on the DevOps from an ops perspective. It's different. And again, I encourage people, if they can make it to Discover, to really dive into this even more. There's a whole agenda for you there. So with that, I will end this webinar, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much, Rocky.
You bet. Take care, guys. Thank you.